we're just going to jump right into this particular episode because it's long. So what I'm working on right now is I'm working on the cover plate to the back cavity or the tremolo cavity. And I'm choosing to use this piece of oak firewood that I ripped a veneer off just testing my bandsaw. I filled cracks and crevices and knot holes with epoxy prior to this months and months ago. Not intentional for this particular project, but I figured it'd make a cool, interesting back cover plate. So that's the section that I picked out, and it proves to bite me in the backside for obvious reasons a little bit later. But once I've got it traced out using the template that I used to actually cut the recess for the control cavity cover plate in the back, or the trim cavity cover plate in the back, I use that to kind of rough out the shape, and I want it to be a nice, snug, tight fit. So I sneak up on the line using a scroll saw, and then I use the oscillating belt sander to get close to the line, and then fine tune it with hand sanding and files until I get it to be a nice, snug, tight fit. And that's where we kind of leave it at. And I go ahead and start pre-drilling all of the holes and countersinking them by hand, because this is a very it's a very porous wood. I don't want to go too far using a countersink bit, so I just use a hand tool countersink and go that route. This is with no finish on it, by the way. Again, kind of a questionable design choice to go with this type of material with this finish. You know, again, I'm trying to stain it here using ebony stain. This is an oil-based stain, and I don't know, I just can't get it dark enough. I'm used to rubbing on an oil-based stain finish and wiping off the excess. It did darken it quite a bit, but it didn't really penetrate. And I don't know if that's because, well, there's probably some epoxy that got in there that sealed the pores, but not all over the place. All right, so I've got to fix that. Not happy about it, but I got to do it. So as you saw, I'd caused that damage by doing a truss rod adjustment. So I pull the truss rod adjustment nut all the way off of the truss rod. It's a single action truss rod, so it doesn't cause any damage. And I go through with a needle file and just kind of carve that out a little bit more so that I'm less likely to cause that damage when adjusting the truss rod again. And then I mask everything off, and then I decide to go with just the darker charcoal pewter, silver, whatever, the darker color of my burst finish, to repaint the truss rod access. Not a big deal, and I think it's actually a cool looking part of the headstock actually to have that. So what I'm doing now is I'm just sanding everything because I've recoated the entire headstock with clear. So I'm going back up through the grits, and then because I'm using automotive finish, I decided to use automotive finishing products. So a rubbing compound from Turtle Wax, then a swirl remover from Meguiar's, and then back to just a regular cheap Turtle Wax wax finish. Then I do the test fit on the tuners. Put the truss rod adjustment nut back in. Then I drill all the new holes for the tuners and put in all the screws. And then tighten down the nuts. And then I put the string tree on. So now the neck is pretty much done. So I did go back with several coats of stain trying to get that back cover plate darker and darker. It didn't really work. So then I kind of switched gears to the body. I'm going through the sanding process, moving up through the grits. I started at 800. I'm using a dry sanding because I'm just afraid of any kind of moisture getting under the paint and swelling the wood, especially with it being a plywood body. So I got some, some sanding pads to put to use that are not wet and dry. I just use regular dry sandpaper here. So start with 800 and go to 1200, then up to 2000. But you get the idea. That's the start of the polishing process, is moving up through those grits. Then I do the same thing with the headstock on the body. I start with rubbing compound. Which I think is the equivalent of maybe 2500 grit. I'm probably wrong on that. Then I go to the Meguiar's swirl remover. And then to just the regular automotive paste wax. And I did buy this this buffing and polishing mop kit for a drill, and I tried to, decided to give it a whirl on this, and I like it. So 2 coats of wax. And there's the body. So if you're wanting to do a rattle can paint job, it's totally doable. This is, I think, my 3rd or 4th rattle can guitar body paint job. Obviously mostly bass guitars. This is the first time with just automotive finish, and I really like it. So now I'm setting the threaded inserts into the body for the tremolo. This is a new trem, so that ends up causing some problems because it's obviously not, the cavity's wasn't set for this. You saw that in a previous episode, what I had to do to modify the cavity to get it to be covered in all places. And then I don't know how to set up a trem. I don't. So I mess it up here. So my solution was, instead of looking up how to do it properly and then following those instructions, I just went in the opposite direction, and I at least got all the 3 trem springs on. But that chip's a problem. That I make worse. All right, so here's the original pickguard, which is a flat black single ply with a bunch of candle wax on it. I don't know that I like the matte finish, but what I want to do is I'm going to clean this up, see if this is usable, because the problem is the new loaded pickguard I ordered is an actual Strat, and, well, it doesn't fit. So I'd have to account for the fretboard being longer into the body. Not a single hole lines up, not one. So that's very, very problematic. So what I want to do is I want to take this one apart, lay it on top, see if I can't somehow repattern this based on the differences for that. So that's where I'm going to start. Let's get all this junk out of here. All right, so now I start with the disassembly of the original pickguard. I try to clean it up and salvage it so that I can potentially use it, but I jump ship. I briefly, for a brief second, think about doing a matching pickguard to the back cover plate and abandon, because the black just looks so good. So I get all the wax off and I start sanding it, thinking, hey, maybe I can just polish this up. And then I'm like, dude, this is like a $10 piece of plastic. Just get a new one.
So now my bench is cleared off. I can see that I can get at least 2 attempts at this. It's a cool thing about these pickguard blanks is depending upon the size of your pickguard, for the most part you can get 2 out of here. So I feel pretty confident about that.
So I'm out of MDF and I want to get the pickguard done apparently this evening. Apparently my life depends on it, so I go with the only sheet goods I have, which is some OSB roof decking to make the template. I decided to make a template just mainly because I need to put in a bevel on the pickguard. This is a 3-ply black, white, black. So I definitely want to show that off. I want the bevels on the outside edges to be uniform. So you need something for that bearing router bit to ride on. So that's why I'm making a template. And I'm doing a straight up 1-for-1 copy here. And that proves to be problematic for reasons you'll see later in the episode. If I was using the exact same, if I was taking the electronics from the original guitar and putting it back in, it would have been fine, if that gives you a hint. So now I'm just getting close to the line, and then with the scroll saw, I'm just removing the blade and dropping it in the holes that I drilled for the pickup cavities. And of course I break a blade, so I have to change it. And then I start cutting out all the holes for the pickup cavities. Again, my process with any kind of saw is to get really close to the line and then sneak up to the line with files and sandpaper, things like that, especially on like cavity holes like this for a pickguard. This is a lot of effort for a template that I'm only going to use one time, or at least intend to only use one time, because I'm never going to have another guitar body like this. So unless the owner, my brother, wants a different color later, which I can't imagine why you'd want something other than black on this. Just looks so good. But I have the ability to make it another one pretty quickly. So again, I'm sneaking up on all the lines and getting it really, really tight, just using files and sandpaper and rasps. All right, so now I'm happy with my template. I kind of trace it out, trying to make sure to leave enough room to get 2 in case I screw up the first one, which I do. Apparently, I feel like I need to fine-tune it even more. So then I start roughing out the pickguard blank on the scroll saw, doing the exact same process that I did with the template. And instead of, cutting out the pickup cavity holes, I decide I'm just going to drill a hole big enough for the router bit, the pattern router bit, to go through it, because it's just, thin 1/8 inch thick plastic. Shouldn't be a problem. So I do all that on the router table. So again, in this case, this is a top bearing router bit. This is just a flush trim bit. So I go around the outside first, then through the hole for the pickup cavities, and that routes a nice clean hole for the pickups. Then I switch to a 45-degree bevel top bearing bit and do the outside edges for the bevels. And then I start to trace out the pickguard screw holes. And I'm going to use first I'm going to drill out the control pots, the holes for the control pots, and then I'll go back around with a countersink bit. So this is like a one step. It's got a drill bit inside of a countersink, and I do that for all the pickguard holes. Some of you watching already know the mistake that I made. And that was not looking at the dimensions and sizes and mounting locations of the new electronics coming out of this loaded pickguard. So again, the original loaded pickguard doesn't fit So that's why I'm having to make a new one from scratch. So the original pickguard wouldn't have fit around this new tremolo, so I'm having to make some adjustments to account for the trem that I've installed. So I need to notch out the tail side of that pickguard and drill some holes. And apparently I use a coping saw there. Nice. It's a lot of back and forth fine tuning it. Then I shield the back of the pickguard using some copper foil tape, which I probably do way too much. Definitely seems to be overkill in retrospect. But I at least do a nice flowy kind of teardrop shape. That looks cool. You'll never see it, but it looks cool. And this is where I start to realize I done messed up.
So, two mistakes on the pickguard. I sized the openings based on the old pickguard, thinking the pickup sizes were the same. They're not. So the humbucker doesn't fit very well. The old one was too wide compared to the new one, and I need to widen this gap. So I have to take this out, make this just a little bit wider so it can actually freely move up and down. And then I didn't think the switch was going to be, the 5-way switch was going to be longer than the stock one. It was. So where I drilled the screw hole and countersunk it is where the slot actually needed to end. So that's, if it's in the bridge position, I'm good. But here it might be too noticeable for me to tolerate. So put another screw hole here because the screw mounts didn't match. So the old pickup had 2 and 1. This one is 1 and 1, and I didn't take that into account. So that's a new lesson for me. I didn't think, I thought, you know, I've made an assumption and that's what happened. So easy lesson to learn, won't have to make that again. So I want to see how this fits, see if there's any other issues. It appears to fit. Obviously I got to do something about this wiring loom and put it where it needs to go. But I'm happy with the fit. Let me go grab the neck. Alright, I think this is going to look really, really good. But I've got another problem that I caused while I was trying to fix a less than major problem. I want to try a couple of techniques that I hadn't tried before to fix a paint chip that I caused. If you remember when I put the tremolo spring in, I kind of had poor installation techniques and that caused problems. So here's what I'm dealing with. So I sanded this area to 2000 grit after I made my mistake. My mistake was I masked all this off, put a tiny dab of thin super glue just to try and fill this to make the paint not have to go up as much. Because I knew I had some filling to do because of the chip. So the problem was I got greedy and tried to use accelerator. And now granted, I had everything masked off when I did it, but apparently it penetrated through the masking tape, and I've got more issues now than when I started, which is super unfortunate. So this is down to primer again. This is all pitted out. This, I think, would probably disappear with another coat of clear or two. And granted, I sanded this back with 2000 grit just to see if this would come out. See if I could chase it out with the sandpaper. And that ain't happening. So now I've got to try and figure out how to fix this. I still have a chip, so if I'm going to fix it, I might as well fix it. So that's going to mean I got to take the trim off.
All right, back on with the spray painting rotisserie stick. And what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to build up the level of the chip that I caused with my ignorant approach to installing trim springs. And by the way, I don't learn my lesson. I still attach that spring plate and tighten the screws all the way down. So I mask it off, then I go back in and I'm basically taking an X-Acto blade to all the pitted spots that aren't level with the regular paint, and I'm just kind of dabbing in paint, and meanwhile I'm going back and forth and layering coats of lacquer and sanding in between coats on that trim spring cover plate. So I go back and forth probably 3 or 4 times, just trying to build that up and sand it back and get everything flat and level. I'm not trying to go for looks here, I'm just trying to get the surface level. And let it dry, then sand it back. Let it dry, then sand it back. All right, so at this point I've taken it upstairs and I've spray painted that whole patch area. And then I start level sanding the entire back of the body. Because at this point I relent and realize I have to do the entire back all over again. And with the back cover plate, I use super glue to fill all the pores, so I just end up flooding the whole thing. And here I am scraping it off. Not caring about the finish, because I'm going to try a couple other things to darken it up, including Rit dye, which doesn't work because I've already got so many coats of lacquer on here. Most of the grain is filled, but the deeper pores are not. So that's what I'm trying to fix with the super glue. It's just the real deep ones that the lacquer is not filling in.
Okay. Well, that's unfortunate.
This is why you don't use thin pieces of wood that have giant knots all the way across the entire surface. No worries, I can fix it. So before I decide to respray the entire back of the guitar again, I'm confident that I have every ability to jack up the finish even further throughout the final install and setup process. So I decided to do not a dry fit, but a full-on assembly at this point. Just in case I cause any more damage, I will be less angry about having to fix it while I'm already going back to repaint the entire back of the guitar. So I install all the hardware, I install the nut, and I start slotting the nut and sizing it for the string gauges that we're going to put on the guitar, and just do a full-on assembly and rough setup, just in case I cause any more damage. Setting the intonation. With that trim set so tight, it might as well be locked.
All right, so tomorrow, maybe even tonight, I'm gonna try and start repainting the back. See if I can't salvage this thing. I'm just gonna have to live with this dent. I think this is what's going to work. Not exactly happy with the intonation. They're all slightly flat. Not a ton, but slightly. But we'll just have to deal with that for now. But overall, I think we can get this set up without refretting, which really makes me happy. Got a little bit more adjustment to do with the nut. Got to take it down a little bit, but that's to be expected. It's the first time this thing's been under string tension in probably 15 years. Maybe longer. But that paint, I like it. I like it a lot. This is going to be a really beautiful guitar if I can fix this. And if I can't, well, it is the back after all. So the plan is to shoot center with silver, just enough to fill this in. Then just lightly mist the edges to get the burst back. I'm going to try and just tape off the front of the guitar. And just go really light around the top edge because I'm not trying to get a masking tape line around the edge that I have to blend in. So that's going to be the approach. Let's see if I can execute. All right, here it is we ended up repainting the entire back of the body. Wasn't happy with the patch, the bigger patch that I taped off. If you look closely, you can kind of see a line here and a line here, and a little bit of pitting in the clear. So I may need to do, if this may not level out, so I may need to do more clear. There's a couple of splotches from the darker gray. Couldn't really do anything about that. The only way you can help that is when you're dealing with a brand spanking new can, or if you pull the tip and soak it in lacquer, or lacquer thinner. I didn't do that. But I'm much happier with it now than it was before. I should not have gone to these lengths. I should have accepted the chip, touched it up with an X-Acto blade or a quill pen, and put a little bit of clear over it to seal it and called it good. I went too far. That's okay. If this was a client's guitar, I would be redoing this again from start. I would take it all the way back down to primer and start again. So this is, like I said, good experiment, and I'm learning a lot, and that's the whole point. So let's get this rotisserie painting rod off and get started sanding and polishing again. I'm hoping I can get away with not using any more clear, because I'd have to go buy more. And I'm probably, well, let's just put it this way. I've already spent more on paint than this guitar's worth. So, again, it's just one of those things. When you're talking about 13 bucks a can, and I've bought now 4 cans of clear. The primer is about 8 bucks a can. I've gone through easily 4 cans of primer, 2 of primer filler, and then just 2 primer sealers. And man, I've bought 2 of each color of color paint at this point as well, which are 17 bucks a can. So that's a lot for this lesson. But don't hate me, but I'm thinking I'm liking the acrylic automotive lacquer. better than nitro so far. It just seems to be less brittle. It's not super durable like a poly, but it's not as brittle as a nitro finish. I do like nitro though. It feels like this is slightly more durable. So I'm going to go to a fresh pad of 800. From here I'm going to go to 14, then 2000 or 1200, then 2000, and call it good. We'll start on the back.
All right, more sanding, because I get to do the entire sanding process and polishing process all over again. I'm not going to make you watch that again. Same deal. Work my way up from 800 to 2000 grit sandpaper, then rubbing compound, swirl remover, and wax.
As much as I want to start assembly right now, I can't. There's still a couple things I need to do. I need to strip the paint off of the neck bolts from the painting process. I've got some touch-up work where there's super glue that I didn't get off. It's flat, but there is a difference in sheen on the fretboard with the pores being sealed versus being open that I want to try and get out a little bit because it's bugging me, as well as a couple scratches here and there. Additionally, prior to install, I need to find the right wiring schematic, figure out how to properly tune this bridge. I may have some additional clearancing I may need to do on the cavity that I want to research further. And I got to get this cover plate sorted out. I keep doing addition. I was able to salvage the original one that I broke earlier. But I keep going, I keep wanting to try different things with the finish on this material because I think it's cool, but I may be, more is not always better. So what I'm just trying to do is just seal up as best I can the pores, just to understand how many coats of lacquer and sanding I have to do to something without a sanding sealer. So again, just learning experience. Oak is a very, very porous wood. I'm very, very close to sealing this thing up. So that's kind of what I'm going to work on right now, is this and the fretboard. But anyway, I digress. I'm going to sand this to 800, go apply 2 or 3 more coats of lacquer, and then come back tomorrow and see kind of where we're at with that. This is not attached, by the way. This is all just kind of mocked up.
All right, more sanding on that pesky back cover plate. Again, I realize just a black pickguard material cover plate would have been cool. I don't know why I decided to go that route. I thought it was cool. But anyway, here I am cleaning up some of those super glue spots I was talking about and scratches on the fretboard, and then re-oiling it. And I put paint stripper on those screw heads. Now I'm doing all the sanding through the grits and polishing that cover plate. It looks cool. It's just like it doesn't suit this particular guitar. I realize that. I don't know why I was so adamant in doing this. It's a neat feature. It's on the back, so it doesn't really detract from it aesthetically, and it just gives it something unique, I guess. It was a good experiment to see what it would take to get a nice finish on a very porous wood. And I didn't use traditional grain filler, which I should have. All right, so now I'm shielding the entire control cavity and pickup cavity. All the cavities are getting shielded with copper foil tape to create that Faraday cage to reduce electromagnetic interference and reduce 60 cycle hum, because there are 2 single coil pickups in there in the middle and neck position. And then of course this is a HSS, so the H is the humbucker for the bridge. I did make another pickguard off camera to fix the problems that I created with the first one. I'm just attaching the ground wire to the spring plate. And of course, I tighten the sucker all the way down again. Final coat of wax. Then I decided to do a little touch mark on the neck and the body to commemorate this particular build project and when it was done. You can see the red paint in the neck pocket. That was the original color of the guitar when it was new. Yeah, black pickguard was definitely the way to go. Time to string this bad boy up. So I will get a real guitar player with a real guitar rig to demo this thing. I'm not going to try to do it. All I have are bass amps, and I'm not going to do this with like amp sims and my DAW. Plus, I'm not really a guitar player. That's not where my home or my heart is. I can fumble around on one, but I'm not any good. My home and my heart is on bass, plain and simple. This is a one-off project, so I'm going to get a real guitar player with real guitar amps, pedals, and talent to actually demo this thing and run it through its paces. And we'll do a standalone episode on that. Maybe at the tail end. Maybe I'll do a super edit of the entire build project and cap it off with that. Try and get a super edit done in like 10 minutes, and then like a 5-minute demo or something like that at the tail end of that. So if that's the way you think I should do these versus multi-part episodes, let me know. Be interested to see that. Now there she is, starting with the back. Again, questionable material choice for the back cover plate, but it's I guess it's a vibe. All right, well, that's going to do it for this particular episode down here in the basement. Thank you so much for joining me on this particular build. We'll have the demo coming up very, very soon.